Whether it's a shooter, an RTS, or an RPG, you're most likely going to find it in the game's arsenal, presented as a slower but higher damage version of the bow. The crossbow, a weapon, like the bow, still sees some use in modern times, mostly in recreational sports. As I was playing Stronghold in my last video, it got me wondering, what are the origins of this weapon and was it really as effective in real life as it was in the games? The earliest confirmed crossbows with the bronze triggers were found in China, dating back to 600 BC, with some historians claiming that it was as early as 2000 BC. As for Europe, the closest thing to a crossbow was invented in around 420 BC. Nice. It was called a gastraphites, or belly bow, though this wasn't really a handheld crossbow in the traditional sense, it was more like siege equipment. Then from that point on, it didn't reappear until the late 10th century, where within 2 centuries it overtook the bow in most of Europe, with the exception of England of course. The weapon works by either planting the crossbow on the ground and pulling the strings with 2 hands, putting the pressure on the stronger back muscles, as opposed to the bow. As a matter of fact, it's due to this fact that English archers had overdeveloped shoulder and arm bones. You could also plant your fingers on the like button. The other loading mechanism is usually via a windlass. Then, you simply load the bolt and pull the trigger. The crossbow is typically associated with low-scale soldiers. You really can't name any memorable fantasy characters that use the crossbow, compared to the countless heroes using bows. Which makes sense to a certain extent. You need years of training with the bow, while you can train a man in the crossbow in 3 weeks. For example, the English longbowmen started training in archery when they were as young as 7 years old, while you could train a peasant in the crossbow very quickly. So if you had a full armory and an empty barracks, then your crossbow is your best bet. Obviously, the main downside to having a simple to use tool was the complexity of the tool itself. That and the fact that your crossbowman would need a separate shield called pavis to provide cover while reloading meant that arming a crossbowman would quickly become an expensive endeavor. Not to mention, how hard would it be to maintain such a complex weapon? And the final nail, the figurative coffin, would be the slower rate of fire, where you could only fire upwards of once every 20 seconds, compared to the 12 arrows per minute that the bow boasts. That's 4 times as fast. These 2 weapons were put to the test during the Battle of Crecy, where Genoese crossbowmen were pitted against the English longbowmen, where before the battle there was a heavy rainstorm and the English bowmen simply distrung their bows, while as you would expect, it wasn't a very easy task for the crossbowmen. So, with their weapons soaked, losing range and power, and the massive difference in the rates of fire, the crossbow was utterly crushed. Obviously, this is not surprising, given that the crossbowmen didn't really have any of the advantages you'd get with a crossbow. Contrary to popular belief, field battles weren't as common as you think they were. Most of the battles were actually sieges, so in that regard, Stronghold is one of the most accurate games, given that most of the battles are sieges, and that's where the crossbow excelled. One of the main advantages you had with crossbows is that you could use them behind cover. You could even use a crossbow while on your knees, which is something you couldn't really do as easily with a bow. When it came to the rate of fire, the Chinese had invented a repeating crossbow as early as 180 AD, compromising power for the sake of speed. It was not very effective against armor, but Chinese soldiers would coat their bolts in poison to achieve more effectiveness, both in actual performance as well as psychological warfare. Despite its flaws, the crossbow was somewhat of a pre-gun equalizer. A peasant with little training could kill a fully plated knight. But while it enjoyed widespread usage in Europe, with the exception of England to a certain degree, as all things must end, so did its reign, being replaced by firearms by the 1500s, mainly the arquebus. Same rate of fire, more power. The crossbow, however, remains in use to this day in either hunting or by some armed forces. Peruvian soldiers using crossbows to establish zip lines, the crossbow then, an old piece of weaponry that saw use throughout most of the old world, where the only limiting factor was the depth of your pockets, has had somewhat negative media representation for the most part, being seen as a weapon of unremarkable grunts, but sometimes it gets a brief moment of spotlight. In either case, thank you for watching till the end, subscribe maybe, and we will see you on the next one.